Have you ever found yourself wanting something different from the life you've worked so hard to build and then immediately started feeling guilty about it? Maybe your career is successful. Maybe your family is doing really well. Maybe you've achieved goals you once desperately wanted. And yet, somewhere beneath it all, another voice has started speaking. A quieter voice. A voice that's asking, is this still what I want? Or perhaps, what if I want something different now? For many thoughtful, responsible, highly sensitive people, that question can feel surprisingly uncomfortable because we've been taught that changing our minds means we've failed, that wanting something new means we're ungrateful, that we've chosen a path we should stay on it forever. But what if that's not true? What if wanting something different isn't a problem to solve? What if it's simply part of being human? A natural evolution. Before we dive in, I'd like to say hello and welcome. I'm Janet, architect, mentor, watercolor artist, and creative renewal coach. I founded Blueprint to Brushstrokes to help thoughtful, mid and late career adults reconnect with their authentic voice, meaningful purpose, and creative potential so they can intentionally design a meaningful next chapter. And one of the themes I return to again and again is the idea that growth often begins with honesty. Not dramatic action, not radical reinvention. Authenticity and honesty. The willingness to acknowledge what is true even when it's uncomfortable. And today's conversation is about one of those truths. The truth that sometimes we begin wanting something different. Many people spend years arguing with themselves, trying to convince themselves that they shouldn't want what they want. They say things like, I should be happy. I shouldn't complain. Other people have it harder. I chose this. I worked so hard for this. I should keep going. And while those things may all be true, they don't erase what's happening inside. The longer we refuse to acknowledge those feelings, the more disconnected we often become. We start going through the motions. We stop feeling fully engaged. Life becomes something we manage instead of something we participate in. We start running on autopilot. Not because we've done anything wrong, but because we've stopped listening to ourselves. I've wrestled with this myself. For much of my adult life, architecture was a significant part of my identity. And to be clear, I don't regret the path. Architecture taught me a tremendous amount. It allowed me to contribute and design meaningful projects. It helped me develop skills. I got to work with amazing clients and stakeholders. I'll carry these experiences with me for the rest of my life. But over time, I began noticing something. The work that energized me most wasn't always the work I expected. I found myself increasingly drawn towards creativity and painting, but also towards mentoring, toward helping people navigate change, towards conversations about purpose, identity, possibility, and what comes next. At first, I resisted that realization, not because it wasn't true, but because it was inconvenient. And honestly, it was also a little frightening. Because once you've acknowledged something important, you can't really unknow it. I think many of us assume that if we admit we want something different, we're going to have to blow up our lives, quit our jobs, abandon our responsibilities, start over from scratch, move to some remote island, completely reinvent ourselves overnight. And if that's the only option, it's no wonder we resist the truth. Because most responsible adults aren't looking for that kind of escape route. They're looking for alignment. The reality is that meaningful change often happens much more gradually than we imagine. And it doesn't require recklessness. It doesn't require abandon the people we love or the commitments that we have. And it doesn't require burning everything down. In many cases, it begins simply by acknowledging what's true. Here's what took me years to understand. Wanting something different doesn't mean you've made a mistake. It doesn't mean your previous choices were wrong. And it doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It means you've grown. The person who chose your current path may have been making the best decisions available at the time. Those choices may have helped you build stability, experience, relationships, wisdom. They've brought you exactly to where you needed to be in this moment. But growth changes us. And sometimes changing means our priorities change too. I think one of the greatest challenges of midlife is accepting that we're allowed to evolve. We're allowed to become interested in different things. We're allowed to be called toward new possibilities, and we're allowed to redefine success. We're allowed to want something different. But let's be honest, wanting something different can create tensions, especially when other people rely on us, especially when we've spent years being responsible, when we've built our lives around certain expectations. You may worry you'll disappoint people. You may worry they'll misunderstand. You may worry they'll think you're abandoning what you built. I certainly worried about those things. But what I've learned is that acknowledging a deeper calling doesn't automatically require immediate action. There's a difference between recognizing a new direction and impulsively changing course. Sometimes the most responsible thing we can do is acknowledging what's true and then thoughtfully explore it. That's what I've tried to do, not by abandoning my responsibilities or making a dramatic leap, but by gradually creating space for the things that felt increasingly important, by weaving creativity, coaching, mentoring, and meaningful conversations into my life while continuing to honor existing commitments. In many ways, this isn't a story about leaving something behind. It's a story about allowing something else to come forward. If this conversation resonates with you, I'd invite you to spend 10 quiet minutes with a journal this week and consider one question. What might I want now that I wasn't ready to want 10 years ago? Don't judge your answer. Don't turn it into a plan. Don't immediately list all the reasons it won't work. Just let yourself simply listen. What is trying to emerge? What keeps calling for your attention? What possibility keeps returning? Sometimes the first step isn't action. The first step is authentic listening and honesty. Imagine what might change if you stopped fighting the truth. Imagine if you approached it with curiosity instead of judgment. Imagine if wanting something different wasn't evidence that you were broken, selfish, or ungrateful. Imagine if it was simply evidence that you're still growing, that you're still becoming, that life is inviting you into a deeper level of authenticity. Not to abandon everything you've built, but to build consciously from here. I don't think the question is, should I start over? I think the deeper question is, what part of me is asking to be included in the next chapter? Because often we're not trying to replace our entire lives. We're trying to reconnect with neglected parts of ourselves. Creativity, purpose, contribution, meaning, joy, service, connection. The goal isn't to become someone completely different. The goal is to become more fully yourself. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever realized you wanted something different than the future you once imagined for yourself? What was that experience like? And if you're looking for support as you navigate your next chapter, you'll find links in the description to my newsletter, companion reflections, and my one-on-one creative reset conversations. These are designed to help thoughtful adults reconnect with their creativity, clarity, purpose, and possibility through honest reflection and meaningful conversation. If that feels like the next right step for you, I'd be honored to support you. If there's only one thing I'd like you to take away from today's conversation, it's this. You're allowed to want something different. You're allowed to evolve. You're allowed to outgrow old assumptions. You're allowed to discover new callings. You're allowed to become more fully yourself. And acknowledging that truth doesn't require impulsive change. It simply requires honesty. Because the first step towards a meaningful next chapter isn't having a perfect plan. It's telling yourself the truth about what matters now. After all, a meaningful next chapter isn't something you just find. It's something you design. One thoughtful blueprint, one courageous brushstroke, one grace-filled day at a time. Until next time, wishing you a gentle, creative, grace-filled day. And I'll see you in the next video.